the NHS and the Royal College of Nursing are systematically ignoring the Supreme Court ruling on what constitutes a woman. This is a really important story, not just for those of you that are interested in healthcare, not for those of you that are interested in trans issues, not even for those of you that are interested in the way our country's going downhill. This is a story about the way that government bodies, including the Equality and Human Rights Commission, are systematically ignoring the law. And it's going to become a major issue when Nigel Farage becomes Prime Minister. Hello everyone, this is Andre Walker. Thanks so much for watching this important video. Please do subscribe, please do hit the like button, and do also donate to the Patriot Fund. If you've got the money to do so, your money helps patriotic causes. Okay, I was talking to David Starkey a little bit ago, and he was saying that he had a major concern that when Parliament passes the law to abolish the Supreme Court, which I'm sure will happen if Kemi Badenoch wins, if Nigel Farage wins, if Nick Tanconi wins, if Rupert Lowe wins, if Ben Habib wins. I always list all of them, as you well know, because it doesn't bother me which of those people you support. Even Kemi Badenoch's done quite well recently. His worry, that is David Starkey's worry, is that when the law to pass to get rid of the Supreme Court is enacted, the Supreme Court will strike it down. I just want to explain something to you that's really, really simple. So, in the United States of America, they have a constitutional court called the Supreme Court. Got it? And what it does is it looks at the laws passed by Congress, the Senate, and the President, and decide whether they are in concert, if you like, if they comply with the Constitution. That is not what happens in Britain. What happens in Britain is that the Supreme Court simply looks at what government bodies are doing and see if they comply with the law that Parliament has passed. That's why I hate the idea of calling it the Supreme Court and want to take it back to being the law lords. Nonetheless, in this ruling, the Scottish Government and others were questioning whether a woman can be a trans woman or a cis woman, as they call her. Basically, can a man become a woman? And the Supreme Court ruled that the legislation, not the rights and wrongs, the legislation said no, they couldn't. And the reason they said that was because they said there were things like pregnancy, there were things like menstruation, there were things like, probably less so, breast cancer, but effectively there is a specific thing that being a woman causes, or specific things that being a woman causes, which are unique to being a woman. So as an example, a woman's not going to get testicular cancer, but a woman may well get ovarian cancer where a man can't. So effectively what they said was, no matter what you do in your life, you have to be treated as a man if you're a man, or a woman if you're a woman. And that was simply because there were things of rights on pregnancy that couldn't possibly exist for a man who becomes a woman. So that's what they said. Well, that ruling was 8 months ago. And the Equality and Human Rights Commission, who remember supported the other side, that is to say that they were attempting to sue the British government and force them into accepting that trans women were real women, they have still not published their guidance on this. And the Royal College of Nursing have told nurses that they must continue to treat trans women as if they are women for the purposes of medicine until that report, until that statutory powers, until that guidance is published. What a ludicrous situation. Lest we forget Heriot Watt midwifery, which said, and I don't want to be graphic on this, the purpose of this channel is not to shock and offend, it's to just offend. But they said, watch out, when a pregnant woman comes in, when you take her knickers off, she might still have a penis and testicles. No, she won't. Now, what you might find is somebody who, for the purposes of fetish, wishes to go to a midwife, and I think that that is grossly unfair. You know, midwifery is a really, really important job. It's the one medic that all of us will come into contact with in our lifetime, and their skill and professionalism is vital to the literal survival of our country, and indeed our species, if you want to put it that way. For them to be insulted in this way is terrible. Similarly, having a cervical smear test administered anally, I think is just a gross insult to the nurses working incredibly hard. And in terms of chest feeding, I just find the whole concept absolutely revolting. And whether people who are trans are doing that with the greatest of sincerity doesn't matter. It is a giant waste of resources to give somebody a cervical smear test who doesn't have a cervix. Just an obvious thing. In the same way as there was a joke made in Parliament by, I forget which lady MP it was, when she said she'd first joined the Royal Navy, she was asked to have her testicles inspected because it was mandatory for all Royal Navy officers at the time. And she said there really isn't much point in doing that. But it is a serious thing. And the reason why I think it's so serious is what I said at the beginning of the video. It's the fact that these quangos now are without the law. And what I mean to say by that is very simply this. The Royal College of Midwifery and the NHS and the Equality and Human Rights Commission know that what they're doing is illegal. Now, it's not as illegal as shooting someone in the street. You know, it's a civil offence, and these things between government bodies are always arbitrated by the court. There's nothing wrong with that. But they know they're operating illegally, but are continuing to operate anyway. Do you remember when Lloyds Bank stood up and said that even though this ruling by the Supreme Court said that women are women and trans women are not women, even though that, they were standing by their trans people? Well, I think potentially standing by a trans person is to be completely honest with them. And what you have to be in terms of honesty is to say that the medical challenges that a trans woman faces are different to that of a woman, which is precisely the point that the Supreme Court were making. You don't need pregnancy support. You don't need a cervical smear test. All of those things. I was going to say breast cancer, but to be fair, you can get breast cancer if you're a man. All of those things should be looked at seriously. And I understand why somebody might sincerely wish to be a woman. You know, women are great, right? But you can't do it. Or at least you can't do it in biological terms. Now, I'm going to say this to you. You only get to live once. If you want to wander around in a frock, please do so. Knock yourself out, and you can tell everyone that I told you it was a great idea. And the reason I say that is because expressing yourself is part of humanity, isn't it? Having the right to wear what you want to wear is fine. By the way, Romans wore togas, which is much more similar to a dress, and in the Edwardian period, in the Georgian period, men wore makeup and women didn't. The reason was because the men were all craggy and horrible looking, whereas the women looked quite nice. Therefore, it was deemed that they didn't need makeup. So those things change. And I know a lot of young men who perhaps exfoliate and do all those sorts of things that were much more commonly associated with women's grooming in the past. Knock yourself out if you want to do that. But you know, our NHS is under significant strain, and for us to start ignoring the law is extremely dangerous. And I worry about this more generally, because how many of these quangos now are going to ignore the law? And this is my point now. About Nick Tanconi, Nigel Farage, Ben Habib, Rupert Lowe, we're going to have to come up with a name. Collectively, the next patriotic Prime Minister. What worries me very gravely is that David Starkey's right, that what's going to happen is that the Prime Minister will do what James Cleverly said he'd done as Home Secretary, goes in and says, we need to do this, and everyone says, you can't do that, the quangos won't allow it. What about the Royal Navy, when they said that they wouldn't turn round the small boats? We've seen examples of this so many times, and the question now is this: is Britain ungovernable? Because I've seen the following: that a law has been passed which defines what a woman is. Admittedly, it didn't do it specifically for that purpose, but it defines what a woman is. And the quangos are ignoring it. What happens when we start to abolish quangos? Will that be heard? Will they listen to that? I've heard an example by a lawyer on the TV the other day who said that if Nigel Farage abolishes the European Convention on Human Rights as a part of UK law and attempts to deport foreign criminals, then the Supreme Court will strike that down on the grounds that custom and practice in England is that you don't subject someone to torture. Now, of course, that was all about not being tortured in England. What they're now talking about is asserting those rights globally. So what is more important? In the old days, Parliament was supreme, and the law lords, as the most supreme court in England, and then later for the UK, they would lay down the law literally to government bodies that didn't behave. But now that's not going to happen anymore. That is what this is all about. And I say something. We've got to start getting rid of these quangos. We've got to start pushing these things back. You know, the BMA is a trade union. The Royal College of Midwifery, the Royal College of Nursing, whatever you think of it, is a left-wing trade union that has been taken over by the left. Those little sounds so sexist. But those little old ladies that you used to get used to as nurses, they've been replaced by a group of hardcore left-wing activists, certainly at the Royal College, and we've got to start saying we're not willing to accept it. For me, I remember my mum saying to me once, when somebody was saying all R's are the same, you know, all R apes are the same. She said, hang on a second, that's not true. There is an additional aggravating factor. And I said, well, I don't think we should think. She said, well, have you ever been a woman? Do you know? And I thought, no, actually. And what is the great sexism of our society? And I now view myself as a feminist. And I'll tell you why. When I was a kid, being a feminist was all this burn your bra and, you know, all this kind of quite militant stuff that I didn't like. Now I just feel like women had rights for about 5 minutes and then they start to be violated. You know, in pregnancy, defending somebody who's pregnant is an extremely important thing to do, and to see the Equality and Human Rights Commission, to see the Royal College of Nursing, to see the NHS not do that. I want to say, God bless you to all of the nurses out there that are doing their very best in a difficult situation. And to all of the trans people, let me say this. I've already said in this video, you have a right to do what it is that you want to do. Get on with it and enjoy yourself. Wear makeup, wear your hair up, do a frock, whatever it is. But we've always said that there are challenges that are unique to women, and violating their safe spaces, I think, is grossly unfair. And attempting to, in some way, fetishize and denigrate things like smear tests, which I know from my mother and other relatives of mine was a deeply unpleasant experience, which she absolutely hated doing, but obviously necessary for her general health. Obviously, the fear of childbirth was a horrendously difficult thing. Don't denigrate that. Don't turn it into a fetish. Recognise that it's just medicine. And if you don't need a smear test, don't go to a nurse and ask for a smear test. That's all we're asking to do. And I think that that is a very, very fair compromise. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please do subscribe, hit the bell notification icon. It's the best way to guarantee you get all my videos as soon as they're released. And please do donate to the Patriot Fund if you can. Until next time, goodbye.